formulas of happiness are frameworks that always work. They are tools and practices that will bring permanent change to your life for better. We're not looking for temporary solutions. We change and transform. We practice what we preach, and we're gonna share it with you here. Be careful, because you can become seriously happier today.
How did it all start for you? I know that you are PhD, and I guess it's in psychology, but how did it all start with you about sex and becoming cliterate? What triggered
Yeah, okay. So
this?
I am a psychologist, as you know, and I've been a psychologist for over 30 years. And I've always, even in America, a lot of therapists are not trained to deal with sexual issues. And this bothered me from way back when, because when I would ask my clients, do you have concerns in this area? They'd always say yes, and they weren't going to tell me unless I asked. So anyway, I decided I wanted to start specializing in this area. And a couple years ago, or 2009, I wrote my first book, which was for women with low sexual desire. And then I moved to the University of Florida, where I started teaching an undergrad human sexuality class to about 150 students a year. And I was appalled. I was appalled at how little they knew, and I was appalled at how much they'd incorporated false information. And I was also very taken aback by the orgasm gap. And I started sort of teaching to my students. And then I would start getting notes from students like, thanks to your class, I'm orgasmic. Thanks to your class, my girlfriend's orgasmic. And I thought, I've got to spread this beyond my 150, 200 students a year. So that's how the book sort of began.
I guess it's better than getting just an A+ from the class.
Yes. Exactly.
One thing, I know that you're a mother, and in the book you're also telling about your husband. I have a daughter. She's only 3. But she already starts getting interested, not in the way like grown-ups get interested, but still she pays attention to organs, let's call it this way, like to genitalia. Because in the book you share the experience of Katehakis, I guess. She's telling about her mom, and there is this little paragraph where, shout out to my mom. I wanted to ask you, how do you teach your daughters? How do you teach them to be cliterate?
So first of all, that was actually not Alexandra. That was my mom that I was talking about.
Ah,
yes.
Shout out to her.
Yes, it was a shout out to my mother, who actually just passed away recently. So I'm even more pleased that that's in the book. And my daughters are adult women. One is 29 and the other is 26. And so they are fully formed young women. One is about to get engaged. So basically they know everything that I do. I've talked to them about it. And it's both a source of pride and embarrassment, I would say. And they ask me questions. Their friends ask me questions. We have a very open relationship, and I teach them the same things I teach my students.
When they were teenage girls, or, I mean, when they were teenagers, did you do anything specific?
I have a story, and this may be culturally insensitive, and if it is, please let me know, because I don't know the norms there. But when my daughter was a late teen, she had a very serious boyfriend. And I knew they were probably thinking about having sexual intercourse. And so I said to her, like, I don't really want you to do this unless you get birth control. And if you and he are planning this, please let me know so I can get you birth control. She's like, oh, no, Mom, we're not doing that. About a month later, she came to me and she's like, is that still an offer available? And I said, absolutely. So I got her birth control. And then I said to her, and of course my book wasn't written yet. I said to her, look, you don't know what you're doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. And if you take your hints from TV, you're not going to enjoy this at all. I said, so here's a book for you. It's called I Love Female Orgasm. And that's the name of the book. And I said, and it will teach you what you need to know. And if you have any questions, ask me. And she, oh, Mom, she took the book, but then I could hear her and her friends reading it behind closed doors. So yeah, I did educate my daughters. And I told them sex is a very important part of life, and too few women know how to enjoy it. So it's on you to figure it out. And here's some resources. So
great, Mom.
Thank you.
My mom is also great, but for some reason there was no discussion in my family, and I had to discover everything the hard way. And I had my disappointments. So anyway, my journey began because of many disappointments that I faced. So it's a great story, actually. You said, and you say, that sex is an important part of life. And in the book, you also say that, and actually it's one thing that my wife usually tells at all the workshops, like whenever your head aches, whenever you have problems at work, whenever you, I don't know, have an argument with someone, just have sex with your partner, and it's the best thing you can do just to reconnect with yourself. From a more esoteric aspect, how do you feel? What sex is? Is it only about pleasure, or do you see other aspects as well?
Well, I see other aspects, and I think it depends on the person and the situation. So I do think it's a way to connect with yourself. It's a way to connect with your partner. It's a way to sleep better. It's a way to de-stress. For some people, it's a spiritual experience. So I agree with your wife to an extent. The caveat I would make is to not put that pressure on yourself. There are some situations where you are so upset that it's just not going to work. But I definitely agree that it's a great, it is multi-purpose, if you will. It's not just about pleasure.
And how is it to be as husband of you, in the sense that you openly discuss sex, as far as I understand, with everyone who, I'm not trying to offend you in any way,
You're
but
not offending me. I wrote the book. You can talk to me about anything. I wrote that book after all.
You did. You're a person who discusses sex with just so openly, discusses orgasm so openly. Is it like embarrassing for him sometimes, for your husband, or is it a good thing?
Well, he is totally fine with it. He is also a psychologist, and he's very comfortable with the topic. And, he gets a little teasing, but most of the teasing he reports is more like, you're a lucky man kind of teasing. So, so he's fine with it. And my daughters are fine with it. And in fact, I'm actually giving a TED Talk soon. And I just went to a rehearsal, and I took my two daughters, my 85-year-old father, and my husband. And they were all, and it was very explicit, and they were all quite comfortable. And even my dad was like, he's like, this is very interesting. This is very good. I don't know why people are so uncomfortable with what you do. So I just feel very fortunate in that respect that I have the support of my family. So
thank you for sharing. It's actually inspiring.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Definitely everyone thinks about it. I've heard some statistic. I don't know. I don't think it's right about me. I don't think I am like that. But they say that men think about sex like every minute or like every 25 seconds. But
I think that's exaggerated, that statistic. It's made its way around, and it's a little exaggerated.
At least several times per day, they do think about it.
Yes.
So everyone thinks about it, but not everybody talks. I don't remember myself really discussing it with my friends openly. So no, there were a couple of episodes, but it's not something that would happen in even once per year, I guess, just once per lifetime with someone, because for
Wow.
everyone, sometimes it's embarrassing. And I think for men, one of the topics is that, okay, they think that they always have to perform well and nothing can go wrong. So they put this image and picture, nothing can go wrong with me. And they are not ready to discuss what's not working for them.
Absolutely.
But many things that I read in your book were revealing, or they refreshed something, or they gave me another thought. Because to tell you the truth, even though my wife is a Tantra teacher, still I feel some like embarrassment sometimes to start talking with her about that. I wanted to ask you whether you have an experience of how to overcome this, or just advice to men in general on how to start getting more advanced and progress on this path to becoming a better lover.
The biggest advice is to ask, like to talk about it. So many times, like we think it's, so many people, they think, oh, it's too scary, I couldn't talk about sex, even to the person they're having sex with. And that makes like no sense to me. It's like, it's not more intimate to talk about it than to do it. So the biggest advice is to just talk about it. That, you know, ask, the biggest advice I can give to men is that every woman needs something different. And the only way you're going to know if it works, what you're doing, or what that you want, they want you to do, is if you ask and you say to them, I really want this to work for you. I want you to tell me. I want you to show me. And that is the most important thing. And in fact, research, I think it's in the book, women in research, when they're asked what's most important to you during intercourse, for example, nobody mentions penis size. They all mention a partner who's concerned about their pleasure. And I think becoming cliterate takes the pressure off of men to perform. So I think it really benefits both women and men.
There was one statistic that you shared that only 25% of men can actually find clitoris, which is frightening. It's scary.
It's very frightening. Yes. Isn't it? It's scary. Can you imagine if only 25% of women could find the penis? I mean, it's a little more obvious, but still, I mean, really, we're talking about the similar thing here.
Your book is a great myth buster. For example, about the G-spot, I had this idea that this is actually the magical spot that every man has to find. But in reality, what you tell, and you support it with all the research, that it doesn't necessarily exist for all the women.
The G-spot has gotten a lot of hype. And, you know, everybody's like running around looking for this secret spot that's actually hard to find. And some women don't look for it at all. Some women can't find it. And of those who find it, some find it pleasurable and some don't. But I have rarely heard a woman tell me that she doesn't find her clitoris pleasurable. So, I mean, I do think it's important to bust these myths. Yeah. And that's what I'm all about, is busting these myths. So thank you.
Which is a great mission. Do you plan to write anything more regarding sex? Do you have any ideas of how to expand the topic? Or...
I have a few, but I'm not really 100% sure which way I'm going to go yet. So one of the things I've gotten really interested in is sex education around the world. And because I think that's the core problem, is that we're not educating people. So I'm really interested in learning about different sex education systems around the world.
You're absolutely against porn? Or...
No, I'm not against porn. I think that porn can be entertaining. And I actually think that for some couples, it's useful. So for low desire couples to watch it together, people are very visually aroused. So, but what I am against is two things: porn that's degrading to women or men or anyone, And two, I'm really against the fact that our young people, at least in America, are using it as sex education. It is not, it would be like using Superman as your model for how to exercise. Oh, go jump off a building. You know, I mean, it's not reality. It's movies, and young people believe that it's accurate, and that's what upsets me.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that I liked in the book, you said about the thrusting, because I guess what boys or like young teenagers or like young men basically learn is that thrusting is the thing.
Right. And, you know, most women not only don't derive pleasure from that, if women aren't aroused before you start that, it's painful. And we have a lot of women having painful sex and not saying anything about it. And that's really upsetting to me too.
Like in Tantra, a woman is the source, and nothing can be better than like praising the source, in the sense that if the source is happy, if woman is happy, then man has everything. I know it, I mean, in my life, it's very clear that when my wife is sad for different reasons, like I don't have really much energy to deal with what's happening out in the outside world as well.
There's a saying in America, happy wife, happy life. Have you heard that?
No, but it works for me. About your husband again, just that because I want to be a good father, and you did all the talking with your daughters, correct?
He did some talking too.
Any specific advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a child psychologist or a child expert, so I can't weigh in scientifically, but I can just say that my husband made it clear to my daughters that he was comfortable with the topic and that they could ask him questions as much as they could ask me questions. And, you know, he just made it very clear from a young age that you can talk to me about this or anything, basically.
While reading your book, I made many notes.
Okay. I'm curious, did you read the English version or the Russian version?
Yes, I read the English version. My wife, I told her about the book, and we found it in Russian. What she says in practice, and even among women who come to Tantra workshop, is that they don't have orgasms, simply that. When I read your book, I realized how big the problem is. I couldn't understand that in the house where I live, most women don't have orgasms. Mm-hmm. They want to, they hope for them, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, that makes me so happy that people in Russia are reading my book. I can't even tell you how happy. Of course, I can't even read my book in Russian. I have a copy of it, but I have no idea what it says or how it translated. So it's wonderful that it was making the point in Russian as well.
I wanted to ask for your advice and your vision about mindfulness. This topic, it's something I didn't expect to read about in your book, because until that moment, everything was so revealing and really fresh. And when I got to that point when you started talking about the mindfulness and presence, I was shocked in a good sense. I thought, wow, this is a PhD doctor, psychologist, tantrika, who doesn't know that she is. How you came to this point, and what do you yourself practice every day, and what you would advise for men and women?
Wow, I'm a huge believer in mindfulness. And I came to it from both a personal and a scientific point of view. I have a dear friend who unfortunately also really recently passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. Yeah, it's quite tragic. And she was a mindfulness teacher. And she really introduced me to this and to mindfulness and to yoga, because to me they go hand in hand. And she taught a class in mindfulness, and the research is also really clear that, you know, being mindful helps you be more connected with yourself, with others. It decreases anxiety, it decreases depression, it decreases pain, and it is associated with better sex. And to me, like it just goes hand in hand. All the brain research about what happens to your body leading up to orgasm and during orgasm, it's meditation. Your brain goes into a meditative state. And so and we also know that during sexual encounters, most people have invasive thoughts. Do I look okay? Is this going okay? And so I really believe, and I teach my clients and my students too, I make them meditate at the break of my class. Some of them like it, some of them don't, but that to first practice being mindful in daily life and then apply it to sex. And it just seems like the most obvious thing. You cannot have an orgasm unless you turn your brain off, and mindfulness teaches you to do that. And what I do, I actually do meditate every morning as soon as I get up. I get my cup of coffee first, and then I take my coffee and I do about 10 minutes of yoga and 10 minutes of meditation, and then I start my day.
I'm actually very much into yoga. And I really like this fact that yogis have more orgasm.
Because it teaches you not only to be in your body, but to get out of your mind. It's fantastic in that way.
I really had this idea in mind that women who make self-love, they don't want partners. I had this idea that when women use vibrators, they cannot be really interested in men, because men obviously cannot be as long lasting as vibrators. For me, it was really revealing to learn that basically when women self-love, it's actually a good thing.
So women who pleasure themselves have not less, they have more sex with partners and more orgasms with partners because they know what they like, and then they can tell a partner that. Also, the more sex you have, the more you want. So that includes with yourself. And then, vibrators are not a replacement for men. They're just like a tool to use. And in fact, most vibrators, you don't use it that long, 2-3 minutes and the woman's done. And most vibrators are not placed internally, they're placed externally. And so it doesn't really have anything to do with, it's not a comparable to men. And in fact, as I recommend in the book, one of the best predictors of a woman's sexual satisfaction is her partner's acceptance of her vibrator use. And so having men know that, and I say in the book, vibrators don't laugh, they don't say I love you, they don't cuddle, they're not men. They simply provide very excellent external stimulation, and a man can use it on you. You can use it on yourself during intercourse, and that's often the key to many women reaching orgasm. So I'm a big vibrator proponent.
Just another thing that I really loved, is when you shared about the hookup sex. You see that women don't usually have orgasm during the hookup sex, and usually it's disappointing for both of the partners. So I guess you're more against it than pro it.
Well, I'm not either for it or against it. I know it's here and it's here to stay, and it's been here for a long time. What I am against is hookups where only one person has pleasure. If you're gonna do it, both people should be having pleasure.
I will be quite open here. I just had it once in my life, and it was really disappointing for me.
Yeah, it's often disappointing and hurtful and all that. But for some people it works, and if it works, fine. But people have to make that decision like any other sexual decision. It's a very personal decision.
There is one scientist, I guess you saw his article, right? But he says that sex is the only activity where they detected that the brain is the most present, like the most mindful. And when people work on, or when they brush their teeth or do some really day-to-day stuff, they are most absent from what is happening. And sex is the main meditation that they see for many people, not for everyone, but still. They gave like 70% of people are more present in sex than in any other activity.
to me, and I talk about in the book, it's like that riding the roller coaster metaphor. Like if you really are present, the rest of the world is tuned out. You're only, and the great irony is that the best sex is when you're most present with your own feelings, not the other person. And so many people make that mistake, and that's why they don't enjoy sex, because they're so outward focused or focused in their head, rather than just being in the moment with their own bodily sensations.
Just to get closer to the end, I would like to ask you about the commandments, and which of your 12 commandments are the most important, just to state them.
I don't know. I'd have to look at them again, but I guess I would say the one that's probably the most important is to think of sex as a topic for lifelong learning. Because if you do that, then the rest of the commandments fall into place. To get more information, to think like just what you're doing, to read things, to seek, solutions to problems, to not think, oh, I know how to do this, so I'm done. I don't need to keep learning and expanding and growing.
So in this way, kind of to believe that there is always a better orgasm somewhere waiting for you?
No, you can always become a better sexual person for yourself. And I'd also say not to be, even though I wrote a book on orgasms, to not be so driven by them, because then you'll be all up in your head. I need to have this. I need to have this. So, but I'd have to look at the commandments again to really say for sure. But that's what pops into my mind.
So when you go into sex, you do not really run for it. You are in there for process, like for the sex itself, not for the orgasm itself.
Right. A pleasure versus an goal focus. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know whether there is any scientific proof about that, but sometimes after sex, after orgasm, I mean, for men in particular, men feel drained when they ejaculate. And sometimes it's just the opposite. They feel more like on the upbeat, more happy in a way, more energetic. I wanted to ask you whether there is any scientific explanation for that, and whether it works for women as well.
I think a lot of it, and I'm not an expert on this, so I probably shouldn't speak much, but a lot of it has to do with the hormones that are released during orgasm and a person's reaction to those hormones. So, there's oxytocin, prolactin, and those are feel-good hormones. They make you feel content and peaceful. So it's biochemical, basically.
One of the things that was an absolute eye-opener for me was in the second part of the book. You were talking about mindfulness, but also you were talking about clarity between people. And the thing that I loved was about questions. Questions are our substitute for the statements that we have in mind.
Really, this is something that I have seen in my own life, in my own marriage, with my children. And people do it all the time. They ask questions to avoid actually being clear about what they're feeling. It never ends well. It always ends in misunderstanding and defensiveness. And, the biggest question that's not a question, as I said, is, do you want to have sex? I mean, usually it's not a question. It's a statement of I do and I don't. But my husband and I, all the time when we're stressed, we always note that we start asking each other questions, and then the other one will get defensive. And it is something, and I work with my clients on this. To me, it's such an important communication skill, and we don't really think about it. So I'm always aware when people ask questions that aren't questions, and try to figure out, well, what are you actually saying?
What will help us to see this? Meditation, like being more present in the moment, or I'm just trying to understand how to see it better in my daily life when I do it.
Yeah, I think meditation helps because it makes you more clear about where you are in the moment. and then being really clear about what you feel, what you want, and being willing to say it in a caring, loving way instead of asking a question that is evasive or not a question. And so I actually try to help people understand that it's kinder in the long run to say something that is really important to you in a loving, kind way than by asking some cryptic question that the person has no idea what you're really saying at all. So that's what helps me.
But do you still find yourself asking these questions these days? Or do you just see yourself having it in mind and just stopping yourself from that?
Both. A lot of times, I don't do it as much with my husband. I think I'm more inclined to do it with my daughters when I'm like, because they're adult women and I don't want to be invasive. And so I don't want to like give my opinion too strongly. So I'll ask some weird question. And so I think it's for me, it's when I want to be conflict avoidant or smooth something out or want someone to like me, I'm more inclined to fall into that habit. But I constantly work on it.
Do you mind sharing some example with your daughter?
One of my daughters is in the process of interviewing for residency placement. She's finishing med school. And I was concerned about one of the interviews. So instead of just saying like, hey, I've been worried about this, I'd like to hear about how it went, I said, so did you have a good interview? And it was like, she got kind of defensive. If I would have owned that it was me that wanted to know, that conversation would have gone better. That's the most recent example I can think of. So, or my dad has just been ill and he's living with us. That's another. He's supposed to be taking medicine every day. And I said, Dad, did you take your medicine? And he was like, of course I did, Mom. Like he was being sarcastic. And what I should have said is, Dad, I'm really worried about your health. I'd like to know if you took your medicine today. I should have owned that. And so those are the examples that come to mind.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck. It's a lifelong journey. Thank you. I really appreciate talking to you. It's been interesting, and I'm honored that you read my book and you have such good thoughts about it. And